Hey there, I'm Joey from EDA Trek, and I need your help. I've got a question I need an answer to. Do I take this deck apart? Real quick, some context. Last year, my resolution for 2023 was that I wanted to commit to having fewer total decks because I was constantly brewing. And instead of constantly building things that were new, I just wanted to have a few forever decks. And for further context, earlier this year, I made a video about how I broke that resolution immediately because I just couldn't stop brewing after all. But after that, for a while, I actually did kind of tone it down. I wasn't brewing quite so consistently. Maybe I felt like I'd got something out of my system. And I started to take note of the decks that I wasn't playing at all, and I gave some of them the chop. I, wanted to take them apart and sell some of those parts so that I could afford other cool cards to play in the rest of the decks that I was playing more consistently. But then just a little while ago, a new commander came out that intrigued me a lot, and it was one that I thought would become a member of my permanent roster, and that was Tyvar the Bellicose. I really fell for this guy. That ability is so cool. Whenever your creatures make mana, they get that much bigger. Every time I tap Viridian Joiner or Kami of the False Hope, they make more mana and therefore get exponentially bigger and make exponentially more mana. Just hecking awesome. I threw together a list for this commander, and it was so much fun to brew. It was so intriguing finding all the mana dorks that would carry counters so well. I opted not for the usual 1-drop mana dorks, but instead I went for anything that could tap for a minimum of 2 mana per turn. And there are some really awesome tricks that I just love in this deck. Untapping everything for surprise extra counters on other people's turns, using cards that give trample that will pair with the death touch that Tyvar himself will give to elves, using a card like Mana Reflection, not just as a mana doubler, but as an anthem effect, because making more mana means getting so many more counters. I felt like my brain was exploding building this deck because there were so many cool things to discover in the process of brewing it. But here's the thing. I've played this deck one time this year, and I haven't played it since. We've all had decks like that, right? I think Primal Surge is probably the example of this. Often when I see folks cast this spell and win the game by dumping so many cards into play, I've seen after that they're not necessarily as keen to do it again and again. Instead, it's more like they feel satisfied and that they're done with it. They did the thing, and now they'll maybe look for something else. I know I felt that way the first time that I cast a Tooth and Nail to find a Machaeus and a Triskelion combo. It was like, hey, I did the thing. Okay. I don't think I need to do that thing again now. I think I probably want more variety from now on. And often this emotion crops up for individual cards. We talked a lot about that on this channel, especially with some big examples like Craterhoof Behemoth or Torment of Hailfire, where it was like, boom, okay, I did the thing, and now, all right. I maybe don't want to win that way every single time, and I think from here, maybe I'll try a couple of other win conditions, vary things up, because I've done those already and want to see what else I can pull off. But man, it sucks when that emotion applies not just to a single card, but to a whole deck. And that's the wall that I just hit with this commander that I just built. I built the deck and then immediately I was over it. The heck? What do I do? Now, I want to try my best to be transparent about the thought process here, because I wasn't really sure whether I should make this into an actual video subject. Because, to put myself on the spot a little bit here, I had some anxiety about this particular emotion, specifically because it feels like this emotion might, for lack of a better word, be the disease of privilege. I already have a lot of other decks already, and the fact that those are already doing so many other varied things, maybe that could be the thing that's informing my emotion now here with this particular deck, since this one is, by comparison, doing more niche things in a more niche way. Whereas maybe someone who has fewer decks doesn't have that comparison in their minds, and therefore might not run into that same wall that I've just hit. What's the problem here, dude? That you have a whole bunch of decks? What's going on? That is the anxiety I feel like I'm living in with this situation right now. And I guess the fact that I've actually committed to making this video and that I've published it is indeed my way of answering or confronting that anxiety and saying that, no, I guess not. I think I've been dwelling on this subject for a while now, because I do in fact worry that this experience is the same all around, that it's not specific to folks with a lot of decks, that it will in fact be the same for folks who have lots of decks and for folks who have fewer of them. Not Tyvar specifically as an example, but just as a general concept. There are some decks that people out there build and enjoy playing one time, and then you're done and you're ready to move on from them. And I dwell on it because it's an expensive lesson to learn. It's expensive to find out that you don't enjoy playing a deck anymore. Like, I already had some of the pieces for this thing that I just built, and that's nice. I didn't have to spend money on those, but I certainly did spend money making this deck, and now I'm not playing it. And I'm just over here thinking like, man, I wish I'd proxied this thing to play it and find out that way rather than being out however many dollars. And another reason I dwell on it is because Magic Design has been going through a lot of big stages lately, and hyper niche commander designs are a much bigger part of the MTG zeitgeist these days. And they need to be when the company is committed to making a minimum of 30 legendary creatures per set. They can't all be as simple as Atraxa and Ishin and Muldrotha, cards that have just one line of text that is very, very simple, very, very elegant, but also very, very powerful. I don't want there to be 30 plus legends per set, but that is the world that we live in. And just practically speaking, if that's the world that we live in, then making things more niche is a necessity in that environment. And I prefer that type of design versus power crept and overreaching types of design. But of course, when there are more hyper niche designs, hyper niche cards run a higher risk of creating situations where we as players build something and tire of it more quickly than something that has more open-ended design. So, what do you do? What do you do when you've built a deck, but then after one single game, you're good? You feel like you don't need to play it anymore. You got the experience that you wanted, and then it's done. What do you do? Like, I haven't had the heart to dismantle this thing yet, but at the same time, I'm not reaching for it on game night. And why do I have it if I'm not going to play it? I opened this video by asking, do I take this deck apart? Because I haven't really been able to decide, and it hasn't been acting as a commander deck for the 2 months that I've had it. It's been acting more as a paperweight and kind of collecting dust. And I'm just like, what do I do with this? This feels weird to have put this much time, effort, attention, money, creative energy into a thing that I'm already moved on from. And that right there is another interesting thing too. I've been living in the reality of, I've moved on from this thing for a couple of months, but now that I'm introducing it to you, it's new information, and I bet it will be exciting information for tons of folks out there who will see some of those synergies that are in the deck and encourage me to keep the deck, to play it, because look at all these cool things that it can do. Don't throw that energy away. And I don't want to. But in my hands, I realized that it was more fun to brew than it was to play. But that last part, that's just it, isn't it? In my hands, it feels that way, but it might not feel that way in other people's hands. That is the solution, more or less, that I've come to, at least for my specific version of this conundrum. I really enjoy playing with new folks, teaching new players how to play Magic or to get into Commander. And in the past, I've had stuff like precons and things that those folks can borrow, or they can borrow some of my own decks. Always you can borrow one of my decks, but my decks are also, I play a lot of graveyard stuff and a lot of sacrifice energies, and that's not everyone's cup of tea. That's not always everyone's jam, especially for a first-timer getting into the format. And having a couple of decks that I adored brewing, that I love the synergies of, at least in theory, but which I didn't always adore playing, maybe in their hands, they will have more of that spark. So over this past year, a lot of those decks that I played the one time and then I never touched again, I've turned those into my new player options pile. For instance, I had a landfall deck that I threw together on a budget, and then it turned out my cousin was kind of interested in learning how to play Magic, and she fell in love with Omnath the Angry Green Jellybean, so now we play Magic whenever she's in town. Or I tinkered with a Lae'zel Master Chef list, and a group of friends were all hanging out one evening and we thought we might play Magic, and my ex-boyfriend, who had never played Magic, was like, alright, maybe I'll give this a shot. And even though Lae'zel was more of a tinkering thought experiment for me, he had such a fantastic time playing green and white that he went out and bought his own green-white precon. Maybe Tyvar will now be one of those experiences for someone too. I played it once and I moved on from it so much faster than I thought I would. But just because it didn't become a forever deck doesn't mean it was a failure. It's still there for someone else to pick up, and maybe it'll inspire them. Maybe perusing through the list will inspire some of the folks watching this video. And this might be a weird thing to say, but it's a nice feeling for my decks to not be all about me. So that has been an interesting development for me over the course of 2023. But now I know I can't be the only one out there with this one-time deck type of issue. So what do you do? Have you encountered this issue? How do you navigate it? What solutions worked for you? If you want to share your experience in the comments, I know there are going to be a lot of folks out there who will really appreciate the insight. If you want to like and subscribe, I know I'd appreciate that too. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, remember, EDH wreck your deck before you wreck your deck.